As a startup, or really any company that is in the innovation ecosystem, cash is absolutely paramount. And it seems like you never have enough cash to fulfill all of the needs or all of the wants that you have in your business. And unless you've raised millions and millions of dollars of funding, you probably don't have a ton of cash to throw around for big strategic bets. And you can't do everything that you want to whenever you're really, really early. A lot of times, once you've grown a lot, you've generated a lot of revenue, and you've now got some sort of a war chest that you can use to deploy, you can make longer, more strategic bets in order to continue to grow your business. But whenever you're just getting started, resources can be very, very constrained, and cash flow can be something that is very, very difficult. So today I want to talk about a very, very simple framework in order to manage cash flow, to know what you should spend money on, what you shouldn't spend money on, and give you the resources that you need in order to optimize cash flow of your business. But before we get started, I want to start by addressing some of the limiting beliefs that people have, or some of the beliefs that people have about cash flow management, about finance when it comes to their startups, that cause people to ignore this or really not put the resources, the time and attention behind it that it deserves. So the first limiting belief is that they don't have the finance expertise in order to properly manage cash flow. People believe that they might need to go and hire a CFO or an accountant or somebody that has some high degree of specialization to really help them think through it. But this is not the case. Cash flow management can actually be very, very easy whenever you boil it down to its core components. And you can go crazy with it. You can create giant spreadsheets, or you can really forecast everything down to the infinite level of detail. But to get started and to really make a big impact here, it can be quite simple, right? So this is something that is worth paying attention to, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Another limiting belief that we see and we hear from a lot of people is that they're not quite ready. Their financials aren't in the right space. They have to get their accounting completely perfect before they can draw insights. But at the end of the day, this is also a limiting belief. I mean, you can go into your bank account and see where you're spending money. Cash is king. It doesn't lie. So it's something that you can get started even if you don't do accounting right now and you just have a bank account. This is a framework that can be applied to any array of businesses. And the third limiting belief is that this is just a lot of work. Really paying attention to cash, it distracts from my business, and it's something that is going to be a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of attention. And so people tend to avoid things that make them uncomfortable, specifically if it's something that it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's not something that excites them. And for this one, I just have to say that it will take some time and it will take a bit of effort. But so you have to choose your heart here, right? It's going to be difficult for you to continue to struggle along with your business if cash is always an issue. If you're constantly having to worry about cash, if you're constantly having to understand and dig into what you should spend money on versus what you shouldn't spend money on, that is going to be a very hard way to grow your business versus the hard of sitting down on a monthly basis and doing the exercise that we're about to go through. It is still a difficult exercise. It can be uncomfortable. It can be a bit difficult, but at the end of the day, it's going to make running your business, scaling your business a lot easier, and it's going to give you a lot of clarity. So you have to choose your hard, and in our opinion, good cash flow management practices is the hard that is going to lead to the better outcome for your business. Now, the promise here is that if you implement this framework that we're about to go through, you're going to have a lot more clarity on where you should be spending your dollars. You're going to have a deeper understanding of the types of dollars that you're spending, and you're going to be able to essentially synthesize your cash management strategy with your business strategy. So it's all going to come together in a really important and impactful way. So now on to the framework. So this is all about categorizing different expenses and understanding where you're spending your money. And the good news here is that you don't need to have the most buttoned up accounting. You don't have to have a CFO. You don't have to even have somebody that does your accounting on a month-to-month basis. You can do this with a bank statement, or you can do this with QuickBooks Zero, whatever it is that you're using, it doesn't matter. But essentially what you want to do is you want to download whatever report that you have, either a bank statement or a accounting statement or anything like that, that essentially categorizes your expenses. It's essentially a list of everything that you're spending money on, and you want to look at this month. So you're going to do this from a month-to-month basis, and this is a process that you're going to want to run month to month. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at all of the expenses that you have, and you're going to bucket them into one of three categories, right? So here are the three categories. The first category are the keep the lights on expenses. These are the expenses that you absolutely simply can't do without. If you cut them, it will threaten the integrity of the business. So these can be like salaries for very key employees, or these could be maybe hosting costs for your software. Generally, these should be seen as you cannot cut these expenses. If you cut the expenses, the business is likely to suffer and it can actually put it in great jeopardy, right? So that's the first category of expenses. The second category of expenses are short-term growth expenses. So these can be things like paid advertising or generally the expenses that you use in an effort to try to generate a return on investment in a relatively short time frame. And we're talking like 3 to 4 months. The marketing dollars that you're spending to grow the business with the hopes of getting a return on those dollars in a short time frame. So just kind of operational growth is the way that we think about these. So that's the second category. And the third category I want you to think of as strategic bets. So these can be like strategic growth expenses that you're very unlikely to see a return on these dollars in the next maybe 3 to 4 months, but these are things that are going to add to your growth in a year, 2 years, 3 years, so on and so forth. So those are the three categories that we're going to be looking at. And so this is a very simple exercise. What you're going to do is you're going to download into Excel a ledger of all of your expenses that you're spending on in a month. And you need to force yourself to go through each expense and place them into one of these three categories, right? So at the end of this, you should be able to look at everything that you're spending money on in a given month, and you should be able to bucket them and see which category do these types of expenses fall into. So if they're in the first category, the keep the lights on category, you're going to keep those. There's absolutely nothing that you can do, because if you cut those, then you're going to jeopardize the core of the business. So in the second category, these are the expenses that you're going to have to be a little bit more strategic with. You're going to have to come up with a game plan on how you want to handle these. So if you have absolutely no money, if you are like very, very, very strapped for cash, then what you may need to do is cut those expenses out for a short period of time. Let the routine operations of the business build up a bit of a buffer that you have that gives you some comfort to start putting more dollars into this. And you want to slowly build up over time, essentially a war chest with these types of expenses. These are kind of short-term growth expenses. This is how you're going to be building up the cash balance. So a couple of tactics that you can use here would be, if you're very low on cash and you have a pretty high degree of certainty that you're going to be able to get an ROI in a very short term on these type of expenses, you can look at getting in things like debt. You can use Stripe if you use them as your payment processor. A lot of times they will offer debt on reasonable terms. You can go to other lenders, and essentially what you can do is you can get other people's capital, use these type of expenses to essentially beat the interest rate, and you can get a little bit of arbitrage there. And that's one way that you can build up a war chest. Another tactic that you can use is just stop spending money on these types of expenses. Let the economics of your business as they exist today play out, and just go completely bare bones on expenses, just with the core operating expenses for a couple of months. Let that build up in your cash balances, and then turn these expenses back on now that you've got a bit more of a buffer. That's going to allow you to essentially deplete some of the cash reserves that you've collected. But then in 3-4 months, depending on when your payback period is, you're going to add those back to the bank account, and then the snowball is going to start to build, and you can essentially keep scaling and keep monitoring your bank account until your bank account gets to a very comfortable position. If they're in the third category, these are kind of the luxury expenses, the expenses that we would all love to have a lot of money to spend on, because that's really going to add to the enterprise value of your company. But if you're in a cash strapped situation, you don't have the ability to afford these types of things. So these are luxury expenses. So what you're going to want to do is continue to go with the process that we just talked about. So either get in debt or cut down bare bones, build up a cash balance, and then start growing and try to build up that buffer of cash until you're in a spot where you can comfortably afford to place long-term bets on things like your technology or new growth strategies, SEO, all of that stuff. So generally, breaking down expenses into one of those three categories is going to really help give you clarity on how you're spending money, and then you can put together a strategy that fits in with what you're trying to do with your business in order to spend more efficiently and more effectively. So hopefully this was helpful. If you feel like I glossed over something or you wish I would have gone deeper, please leave in the comments where you wish I would have expanded on. Helps us make the content a lot better. And if you need help with any of this, Forecaster is a great resource. We have tons of available downloads on our website that are completely free. Or if you have a little bit of a budget and you want to use some software to really streamline your cash flow management, we're a great option. We'd love to chat with you. So as always, good luck and happy forecasting.